Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Final Fantasy XV. I have played my fair share of Final Fantasy games up to this point. It's easier to mention the mainline games that I haven't played rather than the ones that I have. So I haven't played 8, 9, 11, 13, 14, and I guess now 16 is out. So I'm excited to try out 16 eventually. I know that one's getting good reception, unlike Final Fantasy 15, because Final Fantasy 15 was drugged through the dirt. The general consensus regarding this game is that it isn't good and it is a waste of your time, and I'm a mixed opinion regarding that. Part of me agrees, part of me does not, so let's get into it. Now, Final Fantasy XV is weird. You play as our main protagonist named Noctis, and he is accompanied by his 3 bros. You got Prompto, who's he's the gunslinger, a little bit silly, kind of like the class clown, kind of a jokester, but he's got a good heart. You have Ignis, and he's the cool, collected one who is very smart, and he has dual daggers. And then you have GLaDOS, something like that. He's the muscle, and he's basically like Noctis's bodyguard, and he's got a big ol' sword that he uses. And Noctis is the prince of this kingdom. And so he's got his 3 bodyguards, his 3 bros to kind of help protect him while he is eventually going to become king. The game begins with him setting off from his kingdom to go get married to a girl named Luna, and she is an oracle. And so politically, there are a lot of advantages to them getting married. And so Noctis and his 3 bros, they get in his convertible car known as the Regalia, and they're basically going on a road trip to go get married. Obviously, things go awry during their road trip. Mainly the Empire comes and invades Noctis's kingdom and kills his dad. And so rather than a road trip to go get married, we now have to confront the Empire. And things get more complicated. I would even go as far to say convoluted as far as the story goes from there. But at least now you have a general idea of the kind of story that we are playing through. Now, I did mention a convertible. This is the Regalia. And as far as if you're asking me about the kind of time era that we're playing through, it's a little hard to put your finger on when a typical Final Fantasy game takes place. Like something like Final Fantasy 1 through 6, that's typically going to be your medieval fantasy. But once you get into 7, 8, and I don't know about 9. I think 9's more fantasy, but 7 and 8, those are more like sci-fi. You got the spaceships and the guns. And as far as Final Fantasy 15 goes, it's like all of them. Obviously, the main weapon of choice for most of the people here are going to be your typical blades like swords and daggers, but guns do exist in this world. Now, as far as means of transportation, yes, you have a typical convertible that you would potentially see in our world at our time, but there are also spaceships. And the Empire warriors wear typical knight outfits, but then they still will wield guns. So it's all over the place. You can't really put a time period on this type of game. As far as like overall aesthetics, I would probably say modern day. I will say this now, though. I feel like I would have gotten a better understanding of this game and its plot and its universe if I had watched the tie-in movie. I still haven't seen it, but after doing some research, it turns out that there is a movie that takes place before this game to give me a little more context, because I feel like this game did just kind of throw me right in. But I typically feel that way about Final Fantasy games. They just kind of throw you in and you're supposed to learn more about this universe as you play through it. Once the Empire takes over Noctis's kingdom and his wedding plans get thrown overboard, he now has to find a bunch of these old relics from his ancestors, these old weapons, basically like legendary weapons. He has to explore all these tombs and gather up these weapons to get strong enough to take on the Empire. And the idea of this is cool. However, anytime that you want to use a legendary weapon, it does damage some of your own health. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I guess literally it's a double-edged sword, where every time you attack an enemy, some of your own health depletes, and I really don't like the concept of that. It doesn't matter how strong the weapon is, I don't like doing damage to myself. So I typically stuck to other weapons that I would buy from vendors usually. And I guess now is a good time to mention that you are only controlling Noctis. As far as your 3 other bros, they're going to be fighting on their own. They do each have an ability, and once your gauge fills up, you can command them to do that ability. But other than that, you're mostly controlling Noctis. Now, if you wanted to use like guns like Prompto or a giant greatsword like GLaDOS, then you absolutely can. But you just can't play as those other characters. So this game kind of has, it's almost like 2 separate games. And the first half of the game is a big ol' sprawling open world where you are driving around in the Regalia and you are doing quests for people. And I think this is where most people stopped playing the game, and that's why it left such a bad taste in their mouth. For the first half of the game, it's like this. And the reason why it's so bad is because it takes so long to get anywhere in this big, open, sprawling world, and there's not a whole lot to see along the way. So even though you do have access to your convertible at the very beginning of the game, it still takes a long time to get to your destinations. Now, you do have auto drive. You can ask Ignis to drive for you, and you just tell him, okay, I want to go to this quest marker. And Ignis will then drive on the road to this quest marker, but it's possible it can take upwards of 9 minutes, or maybe even longer than that, if you're on one side of the world and you want to get to the other. And there's not a lot of fast travel options available to you to do that. And so unless you have the means, unless you've explored this area before, you're going to have to sit in that convertible for upwards of 9-10 minutes while Ignis is driving. And that is where this game really falls in favor for me, is because it is just so boring just sitting in this Regalia. They just want you to look around at the surrounding area, and yeah, the world looks pretty cool, but as far as like actual interesting things inside this that you can interact with, there's not much. So typically when I'm driving around, I say, okay, Ignis, I want to go here, and then I pull out my phone, or I start watching a YouTube video, or something like that. And the game design choice to have this type of travel is just mind-boggling to me. Now, I'm also playing a replay of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and the fact that in that game I can just fast travel to all these places, and they're just filled with enemies and items and stuff to explore is quite the juxtaposition compared to this game, where traveling somewhere is just so boring. And yes, you can drive it yourself, you can drive the Regalia yourself, but it's still mostly on autopilot. You're just going to stay in the lane, and you're just holding the trigger button to hit the pedal to the metal. What makes this system even more tedious is it has a day-night cycle. And during the nighttime, all the demons come out, and it is scary. And Ignis refuses to drive during the nighttime. So unless you want to be the one who's driving and potentially come across all these strong enemies that could ruin your day, you're going to have to travel back to an inn or find a campsite to rest for the night. And so anytime you try to make some kind of momentum or progress during this open world game, it tends to get interrupted by this night cycle. It also gets interrupted by Imperial dropships, where they will just drop maybe like 10, 15 soldiers right on top of you, and Ignis will pull over and he says, "Oh, we got company," and then you have to fight these Imperial soldiers, and it takes a good 3-4 minutes there. And so this will happen maybe like every 2 minutes, it feels like. And so it's just hard making any progress because you have to worry about driving there, and you have to worry about the day-night cycle, and you have to worry about Imperial soldiers dropping in on you, and it can be quite cumbersome. Now, I played about 10 hours of this whole open world thing. I'm trying to do the side quests and I'm trying to level up my guys. And about 10 hours, I could feel my motivation to play this game really dropping. And so that's when I do what I normally do in this situation, where I put the game difficulty on easy and I say, okay, that's it. I'm just focusing on the main story now. I just want to see where this goes. And once you hit that halfway point, it might be a little earlier, it might be a little after, this game suddenly becomes a linear experience. Now, there still are the scant side quests eventually that you can do, but for the most case, the second half of this game is a truly linear experience. And especially playing on easy mode and focusing only on the main story, that is what I wish this game was, because I was invested in the characters. I liked the four bros going on a road trip together. I actually like the main antagonist in this game. I find him to be quite charismatic and intriguing, very mysterious. You're not quite sure what his motivations are, and you want to learn more about him. And I'm told that the movie kind of delves more into his story. But as far as like the main game goes, it reminds me more of the older Final Fantasy games that I did enjoy playing. Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy XII. I just wanted to play through the main story, and I don't want to have to play through all of this fluff. So once I made that decision to put it on easy and focus on the main story, this game got better for me. The combat is still not all that fun, in my opinion. Yes, it is kind of fun blinking around. Basically, Noctis's main ability that he can do is he throws his weapon to a location and then he can teleport to that location. So you're flashing all over and you're hanging from the walls and you're flashing at enemies, and that can be fun for a while. And I'm sure that there are some systems that I am missing out on because I just put this on easy and I just wanted to focus on playing through the story. So I missed a lot of the combat mechanics, but for the most part, you're blinking everywhere. To attack, you just hold the circle button. You don't tap it, which I'm used to in typical action RPG games like this. You'll just hold the circle button, and Noctis will just be stringing out flings of combos and attacks. And if you see an enemy attacking, you can hold the square button, and depending on your timing, you'll either like dodge it, or you could even do a counter attack depending on how you level up your character. And then you also have access to magic, and magic is kind of unique in this game in that you find these energy sources throughout the world, like electricity sources or fire sources, and you absorb them, and then you can use those resources to kind of make a magic potion. And usually these magic potions are good for 3 spells, and then you have to go find more of these energy pools that you have to absorb. And you can mix in items, and I didn't play around too much with the magic system, but it does seem pretty cool in the premise of it. So I wouldn't get too creative with this. I would basically just say, okay, we're using all of the fire, all of the electricity, all of the blizzard, and then just make like a super powerful spell that I would use, especially at the end of the game. At the end of each combat, you will get a little report card, and I usually got about a C or a B. And one of the big things that I always failed on in this report card is finesse, and I'm not sure what that means. If I was to guess, it'd probably be using a variety of different means of attacking, which I usually wouldn't do. Typically, I would just do warp strikes at the enemies, and I would activate my teammates' abilities when they became available, but otherwise I'm just holding that circle button and waiting to dodge or parry an enemy attack when the time came. Not all that exciting, but visually, yeah, it looks pretty cool, especially like when you parry an enemy attack and you get to do this cool little counter attack. Just like all Final Fantasy games, there are summons, but either I didn't know how to activate them when it wasn't relevant to the plot, or you were only able to do these big powerful summons during certain key points in the main game. But if the latter is the case, I wish that I had more opportunities to do these powerful summons because visually they do look pretty cool. The cinematics are also cool, just like a Final Fantasy game. I love all the cinematics. They just look awesome. By the end of the game, I was pretty invested in the story and I just wanted to learn what's going on. I actually think that this game may have been a better movie than a game, but if we did take out that whole open world section, especially at the beginning of the game, I feel like this game would have gotten more fans than it initially did. I bet most didn't even play to that second half where they found out that it does eventually turn into a more linear experience. Maybe if I really enjoyed the combat and if there was a more convenient travel system, I would have enjoyed the overworld game because there is a lot to do. Yeah, you can go fishing, you can do all these side quests, you can rent chocobos if you want to go off-road where the Regalia can't. You can upgrade your weapons with the mechanic in this game. You can pimp up the Regalia to make it like a big old monster truck if you want. The upgrading system is kind of cool. I wish that there were some more unique abilities that you could unlock, but for the most part, there's like different sections that you can do. So you can upgrade your teammates, you can upgrade your stats. As far as like investing in new abilities, when I was looking through the upgrade tree, I didn't really find any new abilities for Noctis. Most of them seem to be things that you could assign to your teammates, but you can also gear up your teammates with their own gear and add accessories, and you can upgrade how many accessories they can hold. So there's a whole RPG system there. Like I said, I played on easy and I didn't really focus on grinding, and so I was fairly underleveled by the end of the game, but that didn't matter because I was playing on easy anyway. Overall, I am fairly conflicted about this game because, yeah, the first half of the game was pretty rough, and even the second half of the game wasn't mind-blowing, but it was still intriguing, and I got really invested with the bros and the story and the villain. I enjoyed the second half for what it was. And so I'm conflicted between giving this game a 2 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5. But as far as like my last experience playing it, beating the game, rolling the credits and all that, I think I am going to bump it up to a 3 out of 5. But it's a shaky 3 out of 5. I'm excited to eventually play Final Fantasy 16 because I hear that one has a lot better reception compared to this game. But I think that this game still has some kind of place in the Final Fantasy mainline games. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Final Fantasy 15, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!